Hello, ladies and gents, and welcome back to the Left and Right podcast. It's been a week and a half, or maybe even 2 weeks, since I last posted an episode for the podcast, and I do want to apologize for that. We are not gone, we are right here. But I do want to be honest with you all about my short absence. When I started this podcast, I envisioned a little something else. I envisioned myself interviewing different leaders, student leaders, people on campaigns, even politicians, local officials, to be able to interview them and give myself a platform to ask them the tough questions, ask them the questions that you guys all want, so you guys could see their answers and then make your own opinions after that. And that's not what the first few episodes of the podcast was. I do believe that it's important to be politically knowledgeable, to know what's going on in the country, and I encourage you all to keep on doing so. With that said, though, the podcast will be changing a little bit, and from now on I'm going to be having weekly guests, interviewing them, asking them the questions that you guys want to know, asking them the tough questions. So if you're a leader, or you know someone who's involved politically or is involved in activism, please shoot me a message. Tell them to shoot me a message on the Left and Right Podcast Instagram or on TikTok as well. And that's what the podcast is going to be from now on. So if you guys have any tips, any suggestions, any people that you guys think would be a great guest on here, please send them my way. Today, I'm interviewing a good friend, Trenten Rippy. He is the South Regional Director, and he oversees campuses from Oklahoma and Texas all the way to Florida. This past year, he led a 9-month fight to abolish mandatory parking pass fees at Chickasha High School. I saw some of that fight. I saw a lot of posts on Instagram and Facebook from him. And 9 months later, he was able to get that done. So he's done some really good, some really awesome work. He's out there in the front lines doing the good work. So he's also involved with other community organizations such as Earthly Dwellings and the Lions Club International. Really good stuff. And I'm really honored to have Trenten Rippy as my first guest on the Left and Right podcast. I couldn't have asked for anyone better. I've known him for a year now too. So with that said, let's welcome in Trenten Rippy. Alrighty, y'all. It looks like Trenten has arrived. How have you been, buddy?
I've been doing pretty good. Just staying busy. How about yourself?
Yeah, I've been good. Doing a lot of projects. Just changed the format of the whole podcast. So before we start, I do want to say I appreciate you coming on here and taking the time to come on the Left and Right podcast.
Yeah, well, I appreciate good independent journalism, and I think it's important what you're doing here.
It is, and I appreciate that. So I want to start off with YAL, which is an organization that you talked to me a bit about last year. I think that's it, though. We had a brief talking, and so I want to give you the platform to kind of explain what this organization is and let the audience know what you guys do in terms of events, in terms of mission, what your guys' mission is. So I'll give you the stage.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So when we first talked, I took on the role as a temporary contractor through Young Americans for Liberty as the Oklahoma State Chair. And then I kind of climbed up the ranks. I was a Deputy Regional Director, and then now I serve as the South Regional Director for YAL. And I'll use YAL, Young Americans for Liberty, kind of synonymously as terms. But the whole point of YAL is to, number one, identify potential activists out on campuses. It can be out in the community too, but primarily we focus on campuses. To educate students on how to be effective activists, educate on ideology, and I'll touch on that in a minute, and to train them, and then to inevitably mobilize them out into the community, whether that's them getting involved in campaigns, whether that's them working on legislative battles. We also do a lot of what we call our student rights campaigns, And what that
Hmm.
consists of is they'll find a policy on campus that maybe they don't like. Maybe it's a ban on tasers. Maybe it's a free speech violation, like what we're seeing here in the state of Texas right now. And they'll go
Hmm.
out, gather petitions, recruit other students into the cause, and then they'll go out using what we refer to as the confrontational model of politics and make those policy changes.
No, that's awesome. I saw one of your campaigns on your alma mater, I believe, and it's a
Hmm.
really cool deal. And so I don't know if you want to get into that a little bit or go and talk about the ideology first. What do you
Sure.
think would be better?
Let's talk ideology for a minute, and then we can jump into that campaign a little bit because I think the philosophy of Yao will kind of explain why I picked that fight and why we
Okay.
pushed through so hard. Um, so Yao and I put a big distinction on we don't look at freedom, we look at liberty, right? Because when I think of the difference between the two, I think of freedom as you're free to make choices, but kind of the freedom
Hmm.
as we know it still has its limits, right? Or freedom to do whatever you want, right?
Hmm.
Versus liberty, I look at it as you still have the ability to do what you want, to make the choices about your own lifestyle, whether that's owning a firearm, whether that's you know deciding what your career choice is, things like that. However,
Hmm.
the difference between liberty and freedom is not treading on other people's ability to live their lives how they see fit, too.
Yeah,
And
that's good.
we take a lot of influence from the Ron Paul kind of libertarian conservative side of things,
Hmm.
for limiting government intervention, deregulating and letting people, run their businesses how they see fit. Um, but a lot of people get it confused too when like they look at our movement and they think, "Oh, well, you guys are libertarians, so you must be, giant corporate bootlickers." And it's like, well, that's not the case either.
Hmm.
Because when we look at a lot of these larger businesses, they're taking government subsidies, and it's not a free market anymore. So we're very supportive of a true competitive free market. We're not if we think it's wrong to fund the government and continuously pull money into that, we think it's equally as bad to just give it out to private businesses too. We don't think that they should be getting funds through a means of force from other private citizens. Um, and so, kind of with that philosophy of liberty, want to move into why we picked that fight at the Chickasha High School in particular. Um, so number one, I mean, it was a publicly funded school. It's a public school, and a lot of schools within the state of Oklahoma, and I've been throughout the entire United States for the most part, parking facilities and all the grounds that's already guaranteed within the budget. There's not some mystery number that they throw out that they're like, oh well, we hope we can sell enough parking passes to pay for this thing. That's already paid for and covered. But what we're seeing a lot of these schools use is a threat of force and extortion, whether that is removing the vehicle, penalizing the student with a number of different things. Um, it's just a lot of force on students that to me are just trying to get a quality education, right? Um, they're making the effort to come to school and use the services that are already being paid for by their parents' tax dollars, and they should be able to do that. And for these schools to come in and say, well, now we're going to penalize you, that's ridiculous to me. So we went off of the grounds of kind of almost double taxation. Number two, we think threats by force is wrong. And then also of the principle of some students weren't having to pay for it, and then a lot of faculty, if any faculty, didn't have to pay for it. Also, to me, that's financial discrimination as well. If we're going to have a standard, we should hold everyone to that standard, or completely gut the policy. They also weren't properly tracking where the funds from that were going, and when they would make up excuses that, oh well, this helps pay for maybe an activity or for prom or for graduation, as insensitive as it might sound to some, I'm sorry, but it's not the interest of the general public to pay for someone's fun activities, or to pay for their prom. Schools are supposed to be educational, and if it's not being used on educational resources, then it has no purpose and there's no use in taking the money from people unless they want to voluntarily choose to hand it over.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I saw a lot of support, or I saw you post something, and I saw a lot of support from alumni. It seemed like, and from a lot of members of the community,
Hmm.
and so it was definitely a good thing. It seemed like to me, and I was going to ask you what the school's reasoning behind their parking passes were, and you kind of answered that.
Hmm.
Uh, but that's really cool, and it seems like YAL is really about that sort of stuff. About uh, I don't know. You used the term in there. Um, About rights campaign, is that what you said? Is that what
Yeah,
they were called?
student rights campaigns.
And how do you guys enable students to do that? I know you kind of went into it a bit, but how do you get students to be prepared to talk with different boards in the community? For example, you talked with the school board, I believe. And so, how do you guys get students ready to get out there and use their voice?
Sure. So we have a really fantastic team of staffers called our Student Rights Campaign Department.
Hmm.
And depending on the what part of the country the students are located in, they also have a regional director like myself.
Hmm.
Um, and we'll do weekly meetings with these guys because we've seen these fights. I mean, these fights have been going on longer than I've been alive. I mean, it's different
Really?
policy, but same scenario.
Hmm.
And we'll take them and we'll be like, okay, here's all the different things to prepare for. We'll run them through like, the different types of arguments, logos, ethos, pathos,
Hmm.
and how to articulate those points to specific crowds. And the biggest part is confrontation. And I think that that's what definitely separates us from a lot of other organizations and groups, especially when you hear about how to get young people involved, right? A lot of young people were told, you got to be nice, you got to compromise on everything. There are some things you can't compromise on. Now, that does not mean you go and you get violent, you break things, you hurt people.
Hmm.
But that does also mean that you don't have to just give in. We had some people say, well, what if they, made it a $10 parking pass fee? Well, to me, the $10 and $20, there's no difference on principle.
Hmm.
So we show students, how to get confrontational, but also be respectful. Um, how to do like a petition delivery, and we teach them about like petitioning and methods to persuade people and to get them to at least take a look at your cause and show some support.
Uh-huh.
We had these rallies with about 20 to 40 people every single time when we would do one.
Is that
And
right?
yeah, and we would take students out and show them, how to knock doors, how to get out in the community. Um, because the biggest thing about politics too, when you're trying to push an issue, is like it doesn't matter what you care about as one individual. What matters is can you get others in your community to mobilize on that same issue.
Yeah, no, that's correct. I think that's a key point that you hit on. And you said it took 9 months of fighting,
Hmm.
and was there anything on that campaign that you learned something new that yeah, something new, I guess?
Yeah, well, number one, I learned that it is crazy the extent that government will go to try and push back and intimidate a little bit, even on the local level.
Oh,
Um,
really?
a
Can
lot of
you
people
explain
think
how?
that, yeah. So a lot of people, when they see the federal government, they think that's the nastiest it gets. The
Mm-hmm.
thing about local government and where that gets really nasty is when you go up to the federal stuff, you don't know these people. These people have never seen you. But when you get to the local level, like these are people that you might run into at the grocery store. So
Yeah,
it
that's right.
feels a little more personal. We actually had the sheriff's department on our final rally that we had to do. They had the
Mm-hmm.
sheriff's department out there in full plate armor,
Mm.
uh, which I get it. They're trying to say it's for safety, but to me it felt like a bit of trying to intimidate us out of it. We remained peaceful as you should, and we weren't intimidated, and we spoke our mind respectfully.
Mm-hmm.
I had got a call from one of the principals at the school. It was the day that I put out the initial post in November,
Mm-hmm.
asking me to not go out and do the rally. Um, and they'll try to guilt trip a lot of the time. They say, "Oh, well, do you really want to disrupt this board meeting? Or there was one time, I think, in the conversation, she mentioned they were going to have veterans there. And she goes,
Mm.
do you really want to take away from the veterans? And I told her, I was like, look, we're honoring the exact thing that they fought for, which is the right to protest and the
Yeah.
right to go on
Yeah.
public comment. So if anything, we're honoring veterans, and we didn't take away from their time. They still had their moment. We had public comment, and we kept
Hmm.
it cordial. Um, so yeah, that was kind of the encounters I've had, and we can talk about state level fights too. But politics is definitely something. You know, I heard a quote one time from a senator here in Oklahoma, Shane Jett, and he
Hmm.
told me when we were talking about politics that when he first got elected, he went into the Capitol with the kind of the mindset that it's politics is this noble journey, right? It's valiant. It used to be, kind of hunky dory. Everyone's, rubbing elbows and, giving thumbs up and smiles. But
Hmm.
really, when you look at it now, it's really a big battle against right versus wrong. And I think when people look at it that way, um, it allows them to have the tools in their war chest, if you will, uh, to stay confident and stay strong in what they believe in.
Hmm. No, that's fair. I think that's a really good quote. I mean, I think times have really changed,
Hmm.
and I think that's a good quote to kind of summarize, like I said, the change. And so he talked a lot about free speech on here and the right to protest, as you
Hmm.
know, and as the whole nation knows. A couple weeks, um, someone who used their right to protest and their right to free speech was Charlie Kirk, and he was tragically assassinated in Utah, and the aftermath the aftermath after that has been really crazy from the general public and then onto the Congress as well. There's been a lot of discussion there, um, and I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's very sad to see what happened. It was a very gruesome video. Um, Charlie was Turning Point USA was a partner organization with Young Americans for Liberty. And
Okay.
while, sometimes we may have shared, different philosophical differences on maybe how to tackle politics or different things, at the
Mhm.
end of the day, we both had, I mean, we had tables at each other's conferences, events. We had Turning Point members that were YOW members that were Turning
Okay.
Point members. Um, and it's just tragic to see someone so violently assaulted over, free speech. And what I would argue in a lot of ways, I've seen a lot of people say that he was pretty extreme right. I would argue, in comparison, especially to a lot of the people that are starting to come out of the woodwork after this, he was pretty moderate.
Mhm.
And I think, I people try to compare him to, uh, pretty bad historical figures, and it's like, okay, well, show me where these historical figures were willingly giving people from all different walks of life a platform to come together and
Mhm.
have conversations.
That's
Um,
right.
and with the aftermath, it has been inspiring to see so many people that are like, man, like I've got to get involved,
Mhm.
and I've got to get out there and start having those tough conversations. And I saw a lot of activists from different organizations. I mean, the day after the assassination, out on campus, activists were promoting free speech, promoting the values that they believe in, and I think that was a beautiful thing.
Mhm.
Um, that people are, in the face of danger, not showing intimidation, and that they're showing courage. And I think that's what we need to continue to do. Um, I'm sure you and myself, we probably have some opposing views in some sort of aspect. But that's the great thing about America is that we're able to have the civil discourse,
Mhm.
um, and the legal process and the political process is through, uh, the war of ideas and not generally not the war of weapons.
No, that's right, and that was one of the reasons why I started the podcast was to be able to have conversations with people that have similar views to me, but also people that have opposing views, and have that civil discussion and be able to give them and myself a platform to give opinions and let people hear it, and then them make a decision on what they want to believe, what they want to express. And so it was a very tragic thing that happened to Charlie. And as you said, it is inspiring to see activists and a lot of people beginning and starting to say, I need to do something, I need to get into the fight. So something inspiring for sure. As you said, you were the South Regional Director for EA, um, and you said you moved over to Austin. So how's that change been? You said that Texas was a different beast than Oklahoma. So how could you? So what's been going on? What are some of those changes?
Yeah, well, I mean, first off, moving from 17,000 people to who knows how many people, it's really something. With Texas and just the size of the legislature compared to Oklahoma, that's a really big beast to tackle.
Mm-hmm.
When I've done different activism events and things, um, for instance, on the subject of free speech, and just to show kind of the scale of Texas's legislature, we had a there was a very large bill that was introduced over in the Senate
Mm-hmm.
that got rubber stamped. I mean, it was probably 48 hours from
Mm-hmm.
introduction to passage through the Senate, which, I mean, you don't see that in Oklahoma generally. I also say this, like with the tech, before I keep jumping in the bill, when you compare the Texas Capitol to the Oklahoma Capitol, it's like a labyrinth. You go to the Oklahoma Capitol, you've got digital touchscreens, you've got maps on which way to go if you need to find your legislature later. It's super easy.
Mm-hmm.
Texas, you've got like maybe a couple room lists on the wall, and that's it. No digital screens. There's not a lot of people to help guide you around, and it feels intentional, really.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and with the nature of it, I would argue that it is. We see a lot of corruption in the Texas Capitol, like with that anti-free speech bill. It would have stopped anyone um, that was not from the campus from going out and doing activism on there. It has a lot of different restrictions on like time, place, and manner that did not previously exist. For instance, um, the current bill, after it was amended, still includes the provision that bans activism. I believe it's before 8 a.m. and after 10 p.m. or not even
Mm-hmm.
active public demonstrations. The issue with that bill is if you have a group prayer, well, that's technically a public demonstration. So now Texas has effectively banned group prayers before 8 a.m. on college campuses or after 10 p.m. If you wear any sort of political attire, technically that's some form of public demonstration because it's political messaging. Well, apparently after 10 p.m., you have to rip your shirt off on campus, according to the new law. Now, that's being challenged. Actually, Young Americans for Liberty is partnered with FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, to
Okay.
take that on. But we fought that. I mean, I was up helping at the Capitol with different activists fight it for, shoot, it had to be almost 48 hours straight. Like, I would go up to the Capitol, um, go back home and take a nap, and then I'd be right out there in the morning whenever session would start back up. And it was a battle. I'm
Yeah.
glad we were able to, help get some of that amended. But unfortunately, the fight's not over yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, it seems like a lot of work. You said 48 hours. You were working on that bill and trying to get it amended. Um, Besides that, what other projects are you working on? I know you said you oversee campuses from Texas and Oklahoma all the way to Florida. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. So from the like Oklahoma and Texas, and like Arkansas, Louisiana, South Carolina, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, and Florida. Um, those are all the campuses that I manage, and so right now we have a lot of things in the works that I can't say publicly yet. I would definitely encourage to stay tuned. But right now, I mean, we're just ramping up for activism, more and more, getting people out promoting different ideas, free speech. We've got some different policy fights. I know,
Hmm.
for instance, in Oklahoma, we're looking to abolish mandatory meal plans at all public universities.
Hmm.
Um, that one's going to be a big one. We were able to deploy activists, and the activists were able to get it through the House. It died over in the Senate.
Okay.
But that's generally how a lot of policies go. They don't always make it through the first time, and we're going to keep up the fight
Hmm.
because that's what you got to do. Um, in Texas, for instance, Texas A&M right now, I've got a fight I'm helping manage. At A&M, they have a ban on tasers, so we're
Hmm.
looking to overturn that, and just working on a number of different campus policy fights. I know some other high schools are looking at jumping into the parking pass fights. We've got some, like for instance, University of Georgia actually charges students to table on campus, so we're looking to overturn that.
Hmm.
Um, Florida, UCF also has a taser ban. So those are a number of different fights that I'm kind of working on. Um, and then just gearing up for the midterms and gearing up for a lot of these, different local elections and stuff that are coming up, making sure activists are educated on how to mobilize and that we're holding politicians accountable for the decisions that they make.
Yeah, no, that seems like really good work. Um, One thing that kind of interests me that you said was the taser ban. Um, do you know what the reasoning behind the banning of tasers on these different campuses?
So a lot of these policies are pretty old. I would
Okay.
assume a lot of it, I do think it is out of touch administration. I really do. I think there are some people that have a mindset that if you give someone a weapon, whether lethal or non lethal, that they're just going to run around willy nilly using it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I just don't see it that way. That's the numbers don't show that, especially with tasers. I mean, I have yet to see a mass tasering going around on any
Same here.
campus or any school or any place or location. Um, and a lot of the times the policies are overlooked. And some say, oh, well, they don't even enforce that. It's like, okay, but it's on the books and it could be. So, um, a lot of it too is administrators, they like to have control, right? And they want their campus to like seem safe, right? Well, we have a taser ban because campus security is already doing a great job. And it's like, well, if campus security was doing such a great job, you wouldn't have all these, women and other people getting beat up on campus, getting raped at parties, uh, and assaulted in maybe even their dorms. So why not let them have that ability to defend themselves? And a lot of the admin, they don't like when they cave into pressure. So I'll reference, for instance, you could look at um, the high school fight that we did, right? Like with the parking fee. Despite the 9 months of pressure that we did, and when the school finally did change the policy, they didn't mention, Young Americans for Liberty or because of community pressure. It was, oh, well, we're just so nice that we decided to change the policy. So a lot of campuses, it's just a pride thing, I think, too. Um, it's humiliating for some of the more authoritarian, sometimes older generation. Um, to cave into younger people, and to meet the demands that we're wanting.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Pride is a big thing, and um, I guess it seems like the high school had a change of heart um, after 9 months. That's what it totally seems like. Um, Trenton, I want to ask you what you say to people who might be opposed to an organization like yours to be on their campus, and then I'll let you answer that, and then I'll ask you how young people can get involved with your organization. But first, what do you say to those people that oppose just organizations like this on their campuses?
Sure. Well, number one, I advocate for their right to say that.
Hmm.
And I would hope that alone would cause them, sorry, cause them to have a bit
Yeah.
of a change of heart. Um, but my warning that I would issue to people that say groups like, for instance, Young Americans for Liberty shouldn't be on campus is when you give any sort of institution, whether that be your college, your government agency, anything, the ability to pick and choose who can and can't be on campus, you also put yourself at risk of that policy being flipped on you.
Yeah, that's right.
They did that with the Texas free speech fight. They said it was an anti-Hamas bill, and now we're seeing Christian activist groups be booted off of campus. We're
Hmm.
seeing, drumline groups and other groups that, when they were debating the bill and when the intention of the bill was to keep, these, hateful people off of campus, it's had an inverse effect. So that would be my warning is, I understand that people may not always agree with what we have to say, but I mean, we're advocating for the right of everyone to say anything, um, and be very cautious with the abilities that you give the government or powerful institutions to censor people, because it could very well be used against you.
Yeah, I mean, I totally respect that. I know at TU a couple years ago, I know when we were chartering things for different organizations, I know that came up with some different organizations where people didn't like their views or their beliefs, right? And so um, they argued against it. Ultimately, that kind of argument was brought into the conversation. Was once you start going down that way, it could definitely affect you down the road too. So
Hmm.
I totally respect that. If over 100,000 followers on TikTok is what I saw that you guys have, so I see that the organization has had a consistent growing. It seems like a lot of people are involved in it, and so for anyone that's watching now, what would you say in terms of how to get involved uh, with y'all, and then with perhaps just getting involved in politics in general?
Yeah, so I mean, for anyone that's wanting to get involved with YAL or to learn more about YAL, they could, number one, they can feel free to reach out to me on my email. It's just trenton.rippy@yaliberty.org.
Mm-hmm.
If they're interested in just joining right away, it's just yaliberty.org/join-now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as far as getting involved in politics, I think there's a number of ways for young people to get involved. I'll say this first is I think it's very important for young people and for us to establish what means the most to us and what our principles are. Because I've seen a lot of young people, I mean, myself at one point included too, where we're just real excited to jump into things and we're willing to follow whoever gives us an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And then we start to find that, hey, maybe this guy doesn't align with my personal values. And fortunately, I
Yeah.
was able to kind of see that distinguishment pretty quickly, and have myself on the right course to what I believe now is the truth. And I believe I'm doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but unfortunately, I've also seen a lot of close friends of mine fall into the trap of chasing the money, and
Mm-hmm.
chasing the access and not the real power, which is being able at the end of the day, uh, is, you can get voted out of office at any point. You could get fired as a staffer at any point because your boss loses an election. But what you
Yeah.
can't lose is your principles. And so I would say for young people to get involved, one, look at youth groups and different groups like Young Americans for Liberty, or other groups if you want to get involved that way. I think activism is a great way to number one, learn about the political process, but also how to apply pressure and hold like politicians accountable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I would also look at like local offices and go to city council meetings, go to school board meetings, and go to like legislative hearings or committee hearings and look at the bills through like state legislative websites that are on topics that matter to you the most first, because all of the big things that affect our lives happen on the local level. The federal level does have a lot of impact on us too, but the majority of our freedoms are at the fingertips of the state legislatures and the local authorities. So that's what I would say is just get a good grip on your local government first, before you even start to try and expand out and look at the federal stuff.
No, I really like that, and I really like what you said about the principles and beliefs. Um, Similar to you, I've seen a lot of people who jump right in, and
Hmm.
then they learn that maybe that wasn't the move, and so I really like that advice that you gave, and to sit down, make sure your values are strong, your principles are strong, and you said people might lose their jobs. Um, as long as you have those values and those principles, I think you're still at a good spot, and so
Hmm.
I think that's really important. And um, that's something that I had to sit down and say, what do I believe, and make sure I have those values set in stone. And uh, now I don't think anything will will change those. So I think that's really important. Um, Trenton, I want to wrap it up, but before that, I want to give you 30 seconds to a minute to just talk to the audience about what you're up to, what's in the future. Um, yeah, just like a minute or so, so you guys, excuse me, so you could talk to the audience. I guess really about anything you want. I'll give you 30 seconds to a minute, so feel free to say whatever you want.
Awesome. Well, if there's anything the audience can take away from me today, it's that, find your principles and the things you believe in. Um, be very cautious of government institutions, whether that is the local level, the state level, federal, to any sort of level, because any ability that you give someone to govern you, govern over yourself, or against your opponents, could be flipped the opposite way depending on who gets into power. Um, and make sure to hold politicians accountable. They're not people once they get into office. To me, they're public property and their tools, and you're their boss as the taxpayer and as the voter at the end of the day. So I just hope that everyone starts to, look at their politicians and look at their local officials and see if those people really value, what they believe in, and if they're going out on the campaign trail and they're promising a lot of things and they're turning around and stabbing you in the back once they go into the legislature. Get them out, get involved, and get confrontational.
I like that. I like that, Trenton. Trenton, you've been doing great work. I really love what you're up to. I will, I'll tag YAL on the post, and I'll tag you as well in case people want to contact you. Like I said earlier on, I appreciate you coming on here, and just keep up the good work, Trenton.
All righty, thank you very much.
Alrighty, man. I'll see you later.
See you later.